All right, if you're a leader, a high achiever, someone who is used to getting things done, but right now you just feel completely and totally stuck, then this one's for you. We are about to dig into that super frustrating feeling of knowing exactly what to do, but for some reason you just can't make yourself do it. And we're going to reframe it in a way that might just change everything. So let's dive in.
First things first, let's talk about that voice. You know the one I'm talking about. That little narrator in your head that just loves to kick in the second your productivity takes a nosedive or you start putting something important off. It's a voice a lot of us know way, way too well.
I mean, does this question just hit a little too close to home? It's such a confusing and, frankly, infuriating place to be. You've got the drive, you've got the plan, but the action, it's just not happening. And that huge gap between what you want to do and what you're actually doing can feel so deeply personal, can it?
Yeah, when that gap shows up, this is the script that just starts playing on a loop, isn't it? We immediately diagnose ourselves as lazy or having no discipline. We look around and think, well, everyone else seems to be handling this just fine, and then we land on that awful question, what's wrong with me? But here's the thing I really want you to hear. That script is wrong.
So let's introduce a different idea here, a really powerful reframe that gives you a much more accurate and, frankly, more compassionate diagnosis. This is all about shifting from seeing this as some kind of personal failure to understanding it as a condition of your environment. Let's just sit with that for a second. You're not weak, you're not broken, you're not incapable. You are simply overloaded. What that means is the problem isn't your character. It's the sheer amount of stuff you have been carrying for way, way too long. Okay, this slide just breaks down that difference perfectly. On one side, you've got the old myth of laziness, right? It treats the problem like it's a flaw in your character, something you have to fix with more shame and more discipline. But when we look at it as overload, we get it. It's a condition of being totally overwhelmed. And the big takeaway? It doesn't need more pressure. It needs smart, strategic relief. So what even is overload? Well, think of it this way. It's a state where your personal capacity, your battery, if you will, is just running low because you're carrying too heavy a load. It could be mental, it could be emotional, all without enough time to recharge. It's not that you stopped caring, it's that your actual ability to get things done has started to shrink. This is the perfect way to visualize what's really happening. What we see on the surface, what we call laziness, that's just the tiny tip of the iceberg. But underneath the water, that's where the real culprits are hiding. Things like chronic stress, decision fatigue, and just plain emotional exhaustion. These are the invisible forces that are actually holding you back. So, where does all this overload come from? Well, there are a bunch of hidden sources, especially for leaders, that are just quietly running in the background, making every single task feel 10 times heavier than it should. Let's look at two of the biggest offenders, starting with perfectionism. First up, perfectionism. And look, this isn't just about having high standards. This is when every normal task, like sending a simple email, suddenly becomes this high-stakes performance, like you're being judged. And that constant pressure is it's draining. I mean, this example is so spot on. How many of us have spent way, way too long on a so-called simple email, just agonizing over every single word choice? Perfectionism makes the mental weight of starting any task, big or small, feel absolutely enormous, because that internal pressure is just cranked up to 100. Okay, now let's combine that internal pressure with the external pressure of being constantly accessible. In our modern work culture, especially for leaders, your brain never ever gets a chance to fully land on one thing. You're just expected to be available and interruptible at all times. This is so critical to get. Your brain needs time to focus deeply. But when it's being pulled in a million different directions by Slack messages, emails, and all the mental tabs you have open, your attention gets fragmented. You end up in this state of continuous partial attention, and it just torches your energy reserves, making even the simplest things feel incredibly hard. So, if the problem is overload, then what's the solution? Well, the answer is definitely not to just push harder or beat yourself up more. That is like pouring gasoline on a fire. The real goal here is to strategically and intelligently reduce the load. That inner critic of yours might be screaming that you need to be tougher on yourself, but that's just the voice of overload talking. Shaming yourself for being overloaded is like yelling at your phone because the battery died. It's not just unhelpful, it actually makes things worse. What you really need is practical, strategic relief. Okay, so how do we actually find that relief? This slide lays out four really powerful, really doable strategies. First, reduce those open loops. Get all those unfinished to-dos out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Second, make the next step ridiculously small. So small your brain can't possibly say no. Third, lower the pressure. Aim for good enough just to get the ball rolling. And finally, and this one is crucial for high achievers, build in real recovery. Treat rest not like a reward you have to earn, but as an essential part of your job.
Ultimately, all of this comes down to changing the internal conversation. And that starts by finally letting go of that old, unhelpful question that has kept so many of us stuck in this miserable cycle of shame and burnout. This question, why am I so lazy? We need to retire it permanently. It's a dead-end question that only leads to feeling bad about yourself, and it never, ever leads to a real solution because it assumes that you are the problem. We have to replace it with a question that's not only kinder, but a heck of a lot more effective. And here it is. This is the question that can change the entire game. What am I carrying right now that makes everything feel harder than it looks? See how it shifts the focus? It moves from self-blame to curious, compassionate investigation. It opens the door to real answers and to real solutions. Because maybe, just maybe, you're not lazy. Maybe you've just been carrying an invisible weight for so long that the struggle started to feel like part of your personality. What could change if you just started by trying to lighten that load?